Hi everyone. We've got a minute or so just before, it's actually just turned 1:30. So thank you for being prompt. Thank you for signing up and attending the first ever Not Sport Fast Track Funding webinar. We've done seminars before in person, but never anything web-based. So this is all brave new world. So thank you very much for taking the time to sign up and attend. It shouldn't last any longer than an hour. We've got the presentation ready to go. As I say, it's the first time we've ever done anything of this nature. So if we have a few IT glitches, not that we're expecting that, then please bear with us. I'm confident that from the presentation you'll understand by the end of it the way that Not Sport can help you with your project, the way that Fast Track Funding can provide a funding solution, an option for you to consider for your artificial turf, sport, play, or indeed cricket facility. And you'll understand as well how many of the customers that have used Fast Track Funding since 2013 have used the underlying business case to justify the scheme internally at a school, for example, with governors, senior management teams, etc. So by the end of the presentation, I'm hoping and confident that you'll go away understanding how we can help, understanding how Not Sport's Fast Track Funding can provide that funding option, and also how a business case can be built around the facility so that hopefully, as it does on many occasions, the facility pays for itself in the funding period and gives the schools in particular, as well as clubs, a valuable asset that they can use for sport, play, recreation, etc. So as that sort of brief preamble allows, I'll go straight into a sort of welcome and introduce myself. My name's Duncan Bennett. I'm Managing Director at Not Sport. I've been at the company since 2002, and since 2013 have led the multi-sports team, as we call it, on the implementation of Fast Track Funding across the UK. So I'll be your host through the presentation for, as I say, around the next probably 45-50 minutes, after which there'll be a short period of opportunity for questions and answers. My colleague Mark Wood, who sent out the invites and information about the presentation, is fielding the chat area. So if you have got questions now, or indeed as we go through, type them out, send them to the chat area, and Mark will collate them. And then we'll go through them at the end. Obviously, we won't be able to get through every single question that is submitted, but we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. And in particular, if there's questions that are sort of being asked by a number of people, we'll try and cover those ones as a priority. So I think that aside, we shall crack on. Oh, one further thing, just a bit of housekeeping. We are doing this in the office. It's sort of COVID secure and planned and everything, but there is only 5 of us. So if at the end of the presentation you want to get in touch, I strongly suggest that you use the info@notsport.com. That's info@notsport.com email address to get in touch, or you can reply to Mark, who sent you the details of this webinar, direct. So that would be a much better way of going than ringing up, because we are sort of fairly low on staff members, and you might be on sort of a answer phone or a long time ringing through to get hold of us. So yeah, if you can email, that would be fantastic. If you don't want to do that and you do want to call, then obviously feel free to do so, but bear with us if we're taking calls in numbers. Fantastic. Well, I'll go through the presentation, and you'll listen to me for the next hour, but it is interspersed with video, so hopefully that'll give you a bit of a break from my monotonous tone. So off we go. So it's been 7 years, 45 projects, £374,000 on average funded per project, and over £16.5 million worth of projects funded since we launched Fast Track Funding back in 2013. So they're the big numbers that we're talking about here, and demonstrated to give you confidence that this is a viable, credible method of delivering funding for an artificial sport, play, or cricket facility project. And just to give you a recap potentially for some of you, but an overview of Not Sport, we're the second oldest synthetic turf or dedicated synthetic turf company in the UK. There's companies that have been involved in natural turf for a lot longer, but as a dedicated artificial turf provider, we've been around since 1984, and that's led us to become the leading specialists in the provision of sport, play, leisure and artificial grass facilities. We have 4 departments. We have our sports department, which I lead, as I mentioned, called Multisports. We have a playground department called Child's Play, cricket, called Cricket, and an export division that exports some of the patented solutions we have for sport and cricket predominantly, but also increasingly in sport, cricket and play predominantly, but also increasingly in sport out to, at last count, 22 different countries, mainly Europe, but also North America and further afield into the Middle East. So that 36 years worth of experience gives us a pretty strong position to work with you with your project and cover all the salient points required for your scheme, whether it's a new build, a resurface, conversion, upgrade, or whatever it may be. And our sports team, and this project presentation, I should say, kind of focuses on sport more than anything else, and I'll explain why in a minute, is there to help you from the inception of the idea all the way through to completion and beyond. And within that service, we are constantly looking for effective but also innovative design solutions. So we don't have a hockey pitch design sat on a shelf that we put into every single hockey project we do. Equally the same point on football or rugby or cricket or whatever it may be. We design everything bespoke for the individual customers with whom we engage and work, and we're constantly working with manufacturers and innovators in our industry to bring forward design solutions that can provide value, specifically maybe for one sport, but increasingly for multi-sport facilities in the sports pitch side of things. All that has led us to become official partners to governing bodies like Hockey Wales, England Hockey. We're partners with the FIH. We're also ECB. That's, for those that don't know, the England and Wales Cricket Board. We're a code of practice holder for non-turf, as they call it, artificial grass facilities. And as I mentioned, we also provide a unique playground surfacing solution that many local authorities and schools and nurseries, etc., access as well. But realistically, I guess the reason that a lot of you have signed up, or perhaps the main reason everybody signed up, is the fact that we're also the only company that's proving time and time again to offer a valid funding solution to predominantly the education marketplace. And just to focus on that for a moment, because I know a lot of people signed up are from hockey clubs or sports clubs. The fast track funding model is available to everybody. The reason that it's predominantly the education sector that's accessed it is because the lenders see education as low risk, and unfortunately for everybody concerned, sports clubs, hockey clubs, football clubs, etc., as higher risk. So there are different levels of approval required if you're not in the school, academy, independent school. So what I'd suggest as we go through is that you'll pick up a lot of valuable information about how to deliver a pitch. You'll pick up a lot of valuable information about how to fund a project. The reality is, for most hockey clubs, sports clubs, it's a far easier process to partner with a school where you might already play, who have already got a pitch that you might want to improve to a high level of hockey or football, or whatever it may be, or a school that's looking to deliver a new pitch where you can become the anchor tenant. And that model works a lot better. And that isn't to say that you can't get funding yourself, but as an example, we would need 3 years audited accounts, and we would need to do a lot more detailed investigative work with you as a private club compared to a school, which, as I say, is perceived as low risk. So hopefully that clarifies that point on the education market, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail as we work through. So these accreditations we've worked hard to attain. Our partners with FIH and the Hockey Academy, supporting their education programs around the world. Partners to Hockey Wales for facilities and for England Hockey, as many of you all know. And the ECB side of things on the practice facilities, and also match wickets that are extremely popular within the education sector, but also with club sectors as well for junior and adult play. And I mentioned our playground servicing. So across sport, play and recreation, our solution services, design support means that we work very closely with our industry body SAPCA, and also technical committees like the British Standards on which I sit, SEN committees, SAPCA technical committees, etc. And just as of yesterday, we've agreed to join BASIS, which is the British Association for Sustainability in Sport, because we're also very passionate and proactive in providing sustainable solutions within the designs and the facilities we deliver, but also as a company generally. So we may as well get straight into the meat of the presentation and answer probably a question a number of you have got, which is what exactly is fast track funding? And it's basically a method of funding a facility that allows you to cover the entire project cost with fast track funding, and therefore delivering a project without any capital contribution whatsoever. It's designed specifically, we've got a slide in a second going through the sort of timeline since we launched it, but it's designed specifically for the education sector, as I mentioned, but there are clubs and others we're working with who have secured some levels of funding towards their project as well. And what we originally wanted to do was provide a solution to the customers with whom we were working, who were finding it increasingly difficult to access grant aid. So Sport England do a fantastic job, but their opportunities to fund are reducing because their revenues are reducing. Governing bodies, by and large, aren't able to fund projects now because the method of delivering grant aid changed around 3 years ago. And those grants that do exist, like with Sport England, they're heavily oversubscribed and very, very competitive. So there are any number of really fantastic schemes that sit there that in years gone by would have been awarded grants that now don't have access to those. And we wanted to provide a solution to those customers to deliver that project that would still have a huge strategic value, both potentially for the club or a school, but also the wider community in terms of addressing social levels of inactivity and things like that. It's designed to be fully flexible, and the reason we focus on sport, I said I'll come back to that within this presentation, we focus on sport, is because a artificial grass sports pitch, different to a playground or a cricket facility, can generate income through external lettings. So the vast majority of projects, but not all, the vast majority of projects that we deliver use income generated from a hockey club or a football club, or wherever it may be, to cover the cost of the funding solution. And the way the funding works is that it allows you to spread the cost of the project over a period of up to 7 years. And as I mentioned, that could be the entire project cost, or it could be the final £50,000, the final £20,000 of that project value. So if you have got capital reserves, if you do have budgets identified for delivering a scheme, that's great. That can be used, and our fast track funding option can be used to top up existing funds. What it also does is mean that those, and we're living in an increasingly sensitive world because of COVID and things like that at the moment, it allows academies, schools and others with capital reserves to hold on to that money and protect that saving, if you like, that they've got, still deliver the project, but not have to risk losing all their capital reserves and money and funding in a single capital year. So we're increasingly engaging, for example, with academy trusts and schools who do have a pot of money, but they don't want to spend it necessarily. They want to hold on to that just to make sure they've got a pot that they can access if, God forbid, COVID continues and more mitigations needed on that side. And what we do, as I mentioned before, is work closely with you as a customer to design a facility that's specific to what you want to achieve. So if you're a school or a club that wants, for example, a hockey pitch, we will work with you to develop that design to suit your specific requirements and site, so that you retain control of the project. And again, we'll go through that in more detail in a little bit of the presentation to come. And again, perhaps stating the obvious, but the funding is available for any type of project, be that a new build, a refurbishment, be it, as I say, we're focusing on sports pitches, but it's also been used for playgrounds, and also it's available for cricket facilities as well. So that can be new build, resurfacing, it can be upgrading, as we're doing in Dudley at the moment with a bank of old tarmac tennis courts that had little play value. You can refurbish existing facilities. So the funding is there to do a project that you want to do, and we will facilitate that, as I say, with details to come of exactly how that can work. And the important thing, if you are a school or an academy or an academic trust, is that all this is in compliance with the ESFA regulations for what you can and can't do. And the reason that it works is that time and time again, every project gets individually audited. So time and time again, we demonstrate that this is what's called an operating lease. If you're an education sector customer, we have to demonstrate it's an operating lease, which is part of the work that we do. And again, we'll cover that in the next slides. So I mentioned the time frame, the timeline. This is a sort of quick history of how we got to where we are today. Sat in an office telling 100 or so people about fast track funding. The original concept was, as I mentioned, to find a way of funding a project for customers that couldn't access traditional grant aid. And again, if I'm brutally honest, the original idea was because we, since 1984, had delivered a lot of projects, a lot of pitches. For reasons lost in the ether, many of those customers hadn't got a sinking fund to resurface their pitch. And so we were actually at that point just trying to find a way of an existing not sport customer resurfacing a not sport pitch that was built 10, 20 years before. And that was it. It was only as we actually developed the model that we realized that actually this could work for any customer, not just a not sport customer from way back when. And also not just for a resurface, but also a new build or a reconstruction or whatever it may be. So that was where we attacked the idea from, the point that we started the conversation. We then started looking at, okay, we aren't financial experts, how are we going to fund it? And we started looking at different ways that that could work. And we started working with a company called Unilink in 2013. Do your due diligence on Unilink. They've worked on every single project that we've delivered since that first one that's now named on the screen in front of you at Whitefield School, because they were the only company that could get the Secretary of State to sign off the operating lease, branded as fast track funding, in the education sector. So Unilink offer the specialist financial knowledge and expertise that if you're a public sector customer, as a university, a college, a school, etc., you'll need to get through audit. They'll also be ideal for you as a sports club, a hockey club, whoever you may be, to offer a complete overview of the options that exist, because an operating lease is the only way that the education sector can fund. But if you're a club, you could use a loan, a finance lease, which is the other version of a lease, or indeed an operating lease. So Unilink are ideally sat there doing everything that I certainly can't do, which is act as your financial advisors, and you do not want me to do anything along those lines, trust me. So Unilink will fulfill that role and get you all the consent and information that you need to get through the financial specialism and the paperwork and the templates and the lease documents. So 2013 was the first one. We had to get Secretary of State approval, which took a bit of time. Whitefield School then became the first project to deliver a funding scheme through Fast Track. And that is where West Hampstead Hockey Club play, and they were the anchor tenant on that scheme. So the way it works, more often than not, continues to be that model as at Whitefield, where the school have got a vision of delivering a project. In their case, it was a double pitch resurface. They didn't have any capital reserves. They couldn't access grants. They had a hockey club based there who said, right, you know, we need better facilities. We will guarantee that we will use it for 7 years to this amount per week, per month, generating this much income, and that therefore becomes a really robust business case, which means the pitch pays for itself in the funding period, the school get the benefit during the day, the hockey club as the anchor tenant get first dibs on the best slots and use at weekends, and a fantastic state-of-the-art facility as a result. And I mentioned that the funding can go up to 7 years. That first project did get funded for 7 years, and as we sit here in 2020, that means that the summer just gone was the end of their funding period. So we've gone through a full cycle of funding from that first scheme now. So that's the first one that's gone through the full funding cycle, which is fantastic, and demonstrated that the income generation model works. 2014, we had more people sign up to it because Whitefield had done the painful bit of getting the Secretary of State approval. And then in 2018, more schools had used it, taking us over sort of £8.5 million worth of projects. We started running fast track funding seminars in earnest, where we started to engage with schools, clubs, etc. in numbers. The first independent school started using the fund, or did use the funding service option in 2016. And then, yeah, you can see that things started to build and build. The biggest project funded to this point is at the Herts and Essex School, where Bishop Stortford Hockey Club play. You can see the figure there that was funded in full. And we did the most number of projects last year, and effectively what we've seen is a bit of a snowball effect. So in 2020 we've done more than 9, and we're working with academy trusts like Atlas Academy Trust, where we're looking at new build facilities on 2 sites there, which in total will be well over £1 million worth of facility investment there, which is both using fast track funding and topping up existing funds. So you can see the efficacy of the model behind you. There's 40 odd schools and customers that have done it, a couple of independents. Most of these are football, most of these are sports pitches, mix of 3G, Sandfield, Sandrests. There is a couple of playgrounds in there as well. Plumcroft Primary School was a fantastic playground that we did for back in 2015, I think, as an example of a playground that we've done through Fast Track. And here we go. Some of those names will be on the list there that you can see in front of you, a mix of all different types of education facilities. You'll, as probably a hockey club, quickly spot that there's no hockey club's name there. That's because these are the schools that took out the funding, or the sites or the customers that took out the funding where hockey clubs play. We have had a club obtain a grant approval, but in the end they got the funding together, so they didn't need the funding solution in full. So there's no getting around it. This is predominantly accessed by the education sector, on which sites clubs play. Now what we do here is just highlight some of the customers that didn't end up taking the funding through. So all the business case, all the arguments, all the income generation was built around fast track funding, but on these projects left in bold font, they actually ended up funding it either through capital reserves, because governors saw the business case as being a no-brainer, or they found different ways of funding the project. And what's critical at this point is to say, we don't make any more money out of it going through the fast track funding model compared to if you access grants or find funding however you see fit. What we want to do is give you the funding option so that you can make some informed decisions. And if that means that you can use the business case to access funding from elsewhere, that's fantastic. We just want to deliver more projects so that commercially we supply more synthetic grass, and obviously there's more commercial community benefit by delivering more projects. So these projects wouldn't have happened without the arguments created as a result of looking at fast track in the first instance, but you aren't obliged to deliver the scheme with fast track funding if you find different ways of funding as you work through the project.
Initially, we started when we had the idea was obviously with our business team. The idea was to get an turf or no weather pitch up and running, because the local community hasn't got one at all, and there was definitely a need for it. So the bidding process took place alongside working with Garstang Hockey Club, which was quite an integral part of the bid, to try and get the funding. We went through Pussy Sport England. That was quite a long process involving the community, lots of events, etc., to raise the cash. Once the bid was accepted, obviously then it went into the next stage, which was looking at the build itself. You've got initial outlay, okay, but long term, okay, but as a school, it's bringing in revenue, which is a key aspect of the business model when we first started, and that's up and running. So yeah, definitely, it's a source of income, isn't it? Which is current climate schools are desperately in need of. So yeah, can't complain with that. With being a British school, with the weather we've got, we are now able to utilise an outdoor space because of the surface itself, with safety, etc. As soon as the rain comes or adverse conditions, that's not a problem anymore. Especially with the size of it, we can cater for pretty much a whole year group, using a variety of sports with football, your hockey, and we even do cricket and softball, and they can even do tennis on the surface as well, which is fantastic. So it is a multi-use surface, which is made a difference to the students because they're not missing out on lessons. They're getting more time, which is allowing us to complete schemes of work, which is going to hopefully progress the students as far as their sports ability. The fact that we have got, more space for the skill level. Really, if you think that you've got a variety of abilities, learning football, which is a difficult sport for students from 11 to 16, they're able to play on a surface which is true, and they can trust the surface, and also they're not rolling around in the mud, which obviously for some students that puts them off the sport. So it's just about making it a situation for the students to be happier playing, which is going to have an impact on our participation after school as well. It's going to get busier and busier, but obviously Garstang Hockey are based here, and they use it a lot. We've also got a link with, I think the Lancashire games for hockey are held here, because they obviously really like the surface. But we've also got football lettings, and other sports as well, so it's good.
So I think just before we go on to the next section, I think what's useful to note there, particularly if you're a club thinking, okay, well, perhaps the best option for us is to go and visit the school where we play, or one we got links with. As one business manager put it, in fact, she was the fundraiser at Garstang, who's now moved to a different school. She said there is no other facility or investment we can make as a school that can generate 30, 40, 50,000 pounds plus income per year, that then allows me to invest in the stuff we want to do in the science block or in the replacement roof that's leaking over there, etc. So it's a really, really powerful message, I think, for everybody to take away, that these facilities don't just benefit the key users that use the pitch. They can generate an income that nothing else on a school site basically can. That means that the school can then invest that money improving what might be perceived as more traditional areas of the academic curriculum. So the guy at Garstang there, he obviously made that point, and I just wanted to reiterate, that business managers and trusts and schools that we're working with are increasingly seeing this as a way to generate income that then gives them flexibility to invest in other areas of the school site or the trust site. So the process, I've explained up to a point how it works. So the business premise that Not Sport has is to supply the artificial turf of a project at the point the project happens. So if you have got planning permission, if you've got all the funding, then give us a call, because we can sort you out with some synthetic grass, and our job is easy. That's great. Unfortunately, that never happens, because if it's a new build project, then you're going to need a lot of support and assistance through our design advisory service to get you a rationalisation of your project, and then also an understanding of how much it's going to cost, how to get through planning, how to build a business case incorporating other stakeholders of the scheme, and pull the whole thing together. So I'll go through our service in a minute, but that is where we want to get to supply the synthetic grass. Now, what that means, as the first bullet point on this slide says, we work entirely at risk until that point. So we work to try and identify for you the feasibility of the project in the first instance, and then try to give you the best chance possible of your scheme happening, because ultimately, if the project doesn't happen and there is no synthetic grass, then obviously there's no commercial return for ourselves. So our service is there to get you all the information you need to make informed decisions initially, to identify whether it's viable. If it is viable, then get you to a point where obviously we're through all the external consents like planning that you're going to need to go through, to a point where the project can be tendered and constructed. I've mentioned before that fast track funding can provide full or partial funding, and I mentioned just then that we tender the project. So taking an example, over the past few weeks, myself and Tom in particular, who I work with going out and visiting customers, will produce a feasibility report on your project. Now, if it's a new build, that'll assess, right, this is what you've currently got, this is what you're looking to do, this is how you convert that site you've identified, or maybe a couple of sites as options, to a artificial hockey pitch or 3G, whatever it might be. And this is then how much it would cost. And then that lump cost can be funded. And these are the funding projections based on different levels of contribution, if there is any. And then also, this is how much you could expect a facility of this type to generate from income. And we can work with partners. So initially that income projection might be a little bit desk-based, non-scientific, just to give you an idea. As the project then develops, we can introduce you to partners of ours who can do really detailed modelling within your specific geographical location to demonstrate the demand of a hockey pitch, or the demand for a 3G, or whatever it might be. So we can really, really nail down that. So that's the feasibility stage. And then two things run in parallel: the design consultancy and the planning consultancy. If it's a new build, you don't need planning unless you're looking for completely different fencing or lighting for a resurface. So that wouldn't necessarily be needed if it was a resurface project. But if it was a new build, we'd run the design consultancy. So that informs the planning application, and equally the feedback we get from the planning departments and officers, and through consultation with highways, ecology and things like that, will help inform the design, to a point where hopefully we've got the planning permissions in place, and then that design gets put into a technical specification tender package, against which 6 usually independent contractors, specialists in the delivery of artificial turf pitches for hockey or football, whatever it might be, then compete for the right to build the agreed design for your scheme. So you're in complete control as to what those contractors are being asked to price on. They also have the ability to come up with their own ideas if and as appropriate. Those tender returns then go back to you as the customer. You can choose which of the bidders you want to engage to build the scheme, and our service then goes through project management, managing the health and safety, quality checks all the way through construction, etc., etc. And again, the next slide I'll go through in a little bit more detail on that. And then through the development of the project, obviously the funding sits there as an option for you, or the solution, more than likely in some cases, for you to deliver the project. And that can be set up with Unilink to suit your preferences. So that can be annually, you repay a lump, or quarterly, monthly, whatever suits your particular situation. What's important to say is that, and I'll explain why in a minute, the fast track can't be used directly in conjunction with Sport England funding. So the reason for that is that Sport England grants require a security of tenure. So the recipient of the grant, i.e. the school or the hockey club, whoever it may be, have to own that asset that Sport England are contributing to for a period, I think it's 20, 25 years. the reality of an operating lease is, like your mortgage, the bank own the asset, not the land on which it sits, but the asset for the period of funding. So at the moment, Société Générale, for example, are funding a lot of fast-track schemes. They own the asset because they're funding it and you're repaying them for the funding period. But of course, Sport England's grant requirements and terms and conditions mean that you need to own it. And of course, therefore, the two can't meet. And so I've sat in meetings with Sport England and lawyers and England Hockey, etc. And they appreciate and see where we're working. We equally see the value, of course, of what Sport England are doing, but we just can't overcome that terms of heads of tenure issue. So there may be flexibility that can be applied if your scheme is really of strategic importance to Sport England, but it's best to go into this thinking that the two can't go hand in hand at the moment. And that's exchequer funding. So you can access Section 106 monies, SIL funding as it's called now. You could go to waste recycling grants, local grants. That's all fine. That can be used with fast track. It's specific to Sport England funding on this particular point. And then we've mentioned it before. What's critical if you're working with a school, or indeed you are a school, is that this is proven and credible and approved by the SFA. And on every scheme, as I mentioned earlier, it gets independently audited by your school or your academy or your trust auditors to make sure that it fulfills the criteria of what an operating lease is. And that is where we work with our finance partners who look after that element. So the service, this is not sports service, and then it will show how that fits into a funded project in a second. But the service is basically like a quasi-architect service. We are not architects, I hasten to add, but we are effectively specialist designers of artificial turf, sport play, cricket facilities, and the services we offer follow similar to what an architect service would do. So we would, as I mentioned, take an inquiry, qualify it with you on the phone or email, and then come out and set out exactly how to go about delivering the project that you have in mind on site, putting in that overview of the implications of delivering the project, such as lighting, or if you have got adjacent residents, how you'd overcome that, acoustics, if you've got trees surrounding it, how you can overcome and manage that element, so that the whole thing is thought through from day one. And as I mentioned earlier, you can make an informed decision as to whether that project is feasible for you, both from a construction, design, delivery point of view, but also in terms of the costs and how the income could build the bones at that stage of a robust business case. And I mentioned the two things then run in parallel. If there is a viable scheme there, we'll run the planning and the design consultancies together, which inform the ultimate specification, which then goes out to tender once everything's in place. And that first two stages often takes 18 months, some cases 2 years. The longest gestation period we've ever had, as we would call it, is 9 years, which is not something, as I always say, that we're giving you a challenge to try and beat, but it demonstrates the long-term commitment that we have to the customers with whom we engage with, so that we aren't just here if the scheme's going to happen tomorrow or next summer. We're here to make sure that we give you the best advice and support all the way through. And if that's next summer, great, don't get me wrong, but more often than not, it'll be the summer after or the summer after that, as some of you on the presentation will sort of bear witness to. Once the project fundings are in place, the business plan is agreed to be robust. We've got planning permission if you need it. Then, as I mentioned before, it will go out to tender. You would receive tender returns. We can do a tender evaluation to make sure that the competing contractors haven't mispriced the installation of fencing or whatever it might be, and I give that analysis and a report back to you. But it's your choice then which of the contractors you appoint. The type of contractors we work with are on the FA's framework. They would have been part of the Sport England framework when it existed until a few years ago. And they're also contractors that we, by and large, have worked with for, in some cases, 30 plus years, in many cases, 10, 20 years. So we're able to verify and say to you as a customer, any one of those 6 companies are able to deliver the project how we agree it should be delivered, to the standards expected, using the right materials, so that at the end it delivers an FIH compliant hockey pitch or a FIFA compliant 3G or whatever it might be. Once the contractor's on site, our service then goes into project management. As I mentioned, we look after the CDM coordination of that, which means the health and safety side of things. We make, on average, weekly visits to make sure that the contractor is using the right materials, building them, installing them correctly, and achieving the requirements. And as an example of the amount of checks there are in the construction of a new build pitch, SAPCA, our industry body that you might remember the logo being seen earlier, there's 24 separate key stage inspections in the base construction alone of a new build sports pitch. So we are doing 24 individual key stage inspections of your new build pitch, if it was new build, to make sure that that contractor is doing everything to the right standards, using the right materials, and as per our specification. And as I sit here today, I think I'm right in saying that we're the only company that offers that as a standard part of our service. So yeah, we are there to manage the risk and make sure that the facility is being built correctly to a point where the project's completed, it's handed over, but then our service doesn't end there. We offer ongoing condition reports, surveys, advice on maintenance, management, etc. So you aren't just left with us waving goodbye on completion and then ringing you up in 10 years' time, seeing how the pitch is and looking for a resurface. We're there all the way through the life of the scheme. As that project, as I mentioned at Whitefields, that first one, we've done 2 or 3 pitch condition surveys right through to the point where their funding period ended. So that's the service. And then on a project, what that means is that from the start of the scheme, we're working with our partnerships and relationships with governing bodies, you as a sports club or you as a school, to pull together a project team across all the various stakeholders so that we can create a coherent, robust outline design that develops into that specification, that goes out to tender, that then engages the contracting partner on our agreed design, that sets the contract sum, which then means that you can confirm at that point what level of funding exists budgets. If you have some, you're looking for the funding to cover. It might be the entire amount. You might have some money raised or access that you can contribute. It takes us to completion, and then our service runs into ongoing support, as I mentioned, through maintenance and after sales. I've whizzed through that because I think we've covered the service a little bit on the previous slides. So the benefits, what are the benefits of all this? Well, some of these are pretty obvious. Some of them are, again, worth bearing in mind, particularly if you're a club going to go and visit a school or speak to a school about a project after this presentation. So potentially you can turn around to the school and say, right, we're a club, we need a facility, and what we can do with Not Sport is deliver that facility without you having any capital contribution whatsoever, and we'll use the facility to generate you income that can cover the cost of the project. So that's quite a powerful message, coupled with the fact that more often than not, there's a surplus income that, as I mentioned, that business manager said, can be used elsewhere on the school site. It also means if there isn't an existing facility there, or you're improving an existing facility that's going to drive more demand and footfall, you're getting more visitors and customers to your site. The FA, I think, used to say that for every £1 spent on a pitch letting, if you have a cafe or drinks available, there's another £1.50 spent on the site whilst parents are there waiting to kids, etc. So that's a tangible value that you can look at. There's also the intangible, which is if you're investing in a big, visible sports facility like a hockey pitch or a 3G or whatever it might be, that is something that, you know, if you're a school, parents will look at favourably, particularly if they've got sporty children, they're sporty families, and they're thinking, right, this school is investing, and that can also drive headcount within the academy or the school, and we've seen that time and time again. Another thing an external facility can do, so that project in Dudley I mentioned had a fairly old, disused tarmac area, not really, well, not compliant to any sporting level, certainly, and just used as an overspill playground, really. We're reconstructing that to provide a multi-use games area, compliant for hockey, tennis and netball, and also for five-star football and things. And that means that the sports hall and other areas on the site can be freed up for indoor sports if it's a sports hall and things like that. What we don't find is that building a pitch means that the five-a-side football that quite often is in the sports hall can't be replaced with badminton or netball or whatever it may be. So we don't just displace use, we also free up those other areas from overuse. You saw at the video at Garstang, you might have spotted some of the pathways and additional sort of linking routes for the project. We don't just build a pitch as a little island in a field. Our work covers everything that's going to make that project work, from car parking, new access drives, pathways, and if indeed you wanted to improve other areas or build additional facilities like tarmac courts, jump pits, that's commonly stuff that we build into the work we do. So we're looking at a complete facility plan, of which the pitch might be a part, or it might be that we do more than just the pitch to deliver a wider range of benefit to a site. Obviously, an artificial turf pitch provides a year-round alternative to traditional turf, as the sports teacher at Garstang mentioned. Equally, he mentioned more consistent facilities and provision of lessons. But there's no getting around it, really. The benefit of Fast Track is that it allows you to spread the cost of a £500,000 project over a period of up to 7 years. And the income for that can generate a sum of money that will always contribute and more often than not cover the cost of repayments. So the business case, again, I'll whiz through this. We've spoke about it in part as we've gone through. We will work with you, if you're a school, to identify local clubs that can use the facility. If you're a club, then obviously we'll work with you to ensure, like at Whitefields, if it's a hockey pitch and you're a hockey club, that you become, or have the conversations at least, to become the local anchor tenants. That means that in some cases, for example, it's not just the income generation that forms part of the business case. For many schools, or indeed clubs, if they're going out and spending money on the locals pitch 3 miles away, you've got busing, you've got transport costs, you've got lost time in terms of teaching time if it's a lesson, for accessing for lessons. So the savings from hiring other facilities is another tangible sum that can be used in part of the business case to justify the and offset the costs. I mentioned about opportunities to promote the site, generating more footfall and interest in the facility. If there's a lack of sports facilities in the area, certainly this will fit that and fill that demand. And we also provide that letting management advice. So we work with customers who can take on the entire management of the bookings week in, week out, 52 weeks a year if you want them to, and that typically works as a profit share. More often than not, it's an 80%, 20% split, so that you retain 80% of the income, the management company takes 20%. That works really well in many sites. Other sites, there might be existing people that run bookings, particularly if you're a school or a sports club, so that might be something that you can manage in-house. And it mentions there, yeah, we've seen schools predominantly, I must admit, but also sports clubs saying, you know, if this pitch was on site here rather than us travelling, that can save us £40,000 a year on transport, facility hire, etc., which is a huge chunk, as we'll see shortly, of the typical costs back for even a new build project. Oh, there you go. Heavy touch. So how much revenue? It's a big question. Everybody asks. It's sat here. It depends where you are in the UK. So I could talk to somebody that's on this webinar from the north and give them a figure. Equally, somebody in the south might think, well, that's a steal. I pay a lot more than that and never get close. Equally, I could use southern southeast London rates, like at Whitefield, and that would bear no relation to some areas in the northwest. So we'll work with you to identify accurate figures from day one. And what we try to do as well is establish that demand. So there's no point in everybody getting excited about delivering a 3G pitch if in your area there's 5 others and there is no demand for an additional one. But in fact, there is a hockey pitch demand, or indeed there's no demand. At least we'll find that out early and we're not left chasing something that isn't going to be sustainable. So we'll identify that with you. There's no getting around it. Team sports, particularly five-a-side, help fill gaps throughout the year. So if it's a hockey pitch, Garstang's a good example where on a Monday or a Friday there's a five-a-side league, because typically as a hockey club, Garstang are playing on a Saturday and a Sunday. They don't want to be training on a Friday, or indeed the day after they've played on Sunday. So although it can be a hockey pitch, you're looking at different sports to access, and also non-traditional sports. So some of the pitches that we have delivered have been used for American football, lacrosse, other things like that. And then also summer camps are a fantastic way in times of the year where, team sports aren't playing, it's the closed season. Summer camps, summer leagues and things help continue that generation all the way through. In some places, a full-size pitch goes for over £150 an hour, floodlit. Yep, believe me, it does. In other areas, it's down at sort of £50, £60 an hour. So typically we say expect at least 70 to 80. But it does depend where you are. And again, what we'll do is help you identify what that might be. And again, we can work with our links with the governing bodies to make sure that if you are looking to deliver a project, that any latent demand in the area, any clubs looking for training or even a base can be identified, and then we can make that form part of a really strong business case. And as you'll have probably seen, as my fat fingers click through too far, we've got a video next.
My name's Peter Sweeney. I'm the head teacher at St Joan of Arc Catholic School in Rickmansworth. It's been an immense increase on our own facilities that we've got at St John's, but it's been a real benefit not only to our own school but to the local community. We have lots of additional groups from outside of school that come in and use the facility at the weekend and the evenings, but to enhance our own sports facilities and the experience of our own pupils, it's been a fantastic addition to our facilities at the school. It's bringing in additional revenue for the school. Of course, there's some upkeep of the facilities, but we've put in a plan that's looking to make sure that we've got the funds to relay the service should it within a 7 to 10 year window. So we're making sure we get the funds to do that, but it also does bring in additional revenue to support activities in the school, so that we're able to fund things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do so. We first got the idea for this project over 5 years ago from a discussion and not sports inspiration about a finance project, about the way to finance projects like this, and looking at a 5-year repayment plan. Our own work, looking at the financial implications, we actually worked out we could do that ourselves, so we self-funded it, but looking at repaying our own funding stream over a 5-year period from the income that we will generate from the facility itself. But absolutely recommend them the support, both in the financial support and advice, but the actual practical advice about the facility itself was first class. I found their approach very professional from the starting. We were kept informed of all the developments and the stages of the development, how it would take place. The amount of pre-planning information to make sure the facility was exactly the specification that we wanted to meet their needs was really informative from their experience, and being able to share experiences of other facilities with us, and it allowed us to make some really informed choices about what we actually wanted for our own facility at St John's.
So again, just all this is great, and obviously these video testimonials demonstrate what can be delivered. I guess the nuts and bolts of it are how much is a pitch going to cost, capital terms, and how much is it going to cost via fast track funding. So these figures that we're presenting here are basically taken from projects that and reports that we're working on. There's vagaries moving forward with Brexit, so there might be tariffs to add to this on artificial turf or shock pads if it comes from abroad. So this is sort of plus or minus, let's say, 5 or 10% of these sorts of figures. Realistically, you're not really going to be able to do a full-size hockey pitch or 3G for much less than that figure that you see there. You can spend a lot more. You might be able to do it slightly cheaper if you've got a particularly perfect site. But these are the sort of figures we're looking at for a new build pitch. So this encompasses everything we do, everything you saw on that video from Joan of Arc and when Peter was talking, the equipment, the access paths, etc., etc. Obviously, if you're on the side of a cliff or we're looking to build in a swamp or you need new car parks and stuff, all that would be stuff that would be costs added to this figure. This is the pitch and taking a reasonable assumption on the site that's not too bad. We do occasionally build on swamps, so it's not impossible. So how much is the new build pitch? Yeah, around the 550 mark. As I mentioned, you can spend a lot more. Maintenance would be something that we'd always educate and work with you on, but that is a revenue aspect, so you would pay for that separately to the funding, because we can't use fast track to cover revenue costs. It's only the capital costs. So basically, the best way of describing it is if you take 550 and divide that figure by the number of years you want to fund it. So 5 years, you're looking at 112,000. If it was over 7, then without any contributions from elsewhere, you're looking at 85,000, say, which you can sort of see on that table there. And then what we've got is different levels of deposit or contribution, whatever you want to call it. So if it was £50,000 deposit contribution you had to make, the amount your funding reduces, the amount the annual repayments reduce. And we're looking at annual payments. You can make this with quarterly or monthly, as I mentioned. Now, what's vital to see, or you already will have seen, is that there's a final 6th payment. So for the education sector, where it has to be done via an operating lease, one of the tenets of the operating lease is that there is a residual amount left unpaid. So I don't know if anybody's seen the Cycle to Work scheme. That's an operating lease. You get your bike, you use it for 12 months, and then you get a form through that says, right, there's this amount left unpaid, pay that, the bike's yours, or take another lease out for that amount over another 12 months, or you can hand the bike back. And on every scheme, we have to demonstrate that those 3 options exist. So even as a school, and every school we've worked with pretty much goes into this going to take the ownership option, i.e. pay that final 6th or 8th year, to take ownership, you have to go into it accepting there are 3 options available to you. And actually Whitefields in the end did take an extended lease out, so it's not always going to be the case that the ownership is taken on the final 6th or 8th payment. So you have flexibility. And again, Andrew Moss at Unilink, who typically leads this on the Unilink finance expertise side, will guide you through the options available. But that is an operating lease. If you're a club or an independent school, you don't necessarily have to use an operating lease. You could use a loan or a finance lease, which makes that slightly different. But for the purposes of where we are now, hopefully that's illustrative. And again, we'll give you a copy of the presentation so you see these figures exactly as you see them now within the presentation that we'll share. So that's a new build pitch, resurface a hockey pitch with a new shock pad. Then you're looking at around that sort of figure that's in front of you, 210,000. Maintenance again separate. We obviously offer our ongoing service, which is encompassed within the contract sum. And you might be ahead of me if you do £210,000 over 5 years with no contribution. You're looking at around 44,000 or 43,000 over 7 years. That reduces. So a lot of the schools we'll be working with, and the customers that we're working with outside the school sector are looking to keep the annual repayments as low as possible. So the 7-year figure works well. Some though can justify far more income than necessary for a 7-year lease, so they'll be looking at a shorter funding period of 5 years. So Whitefields is a great example where they ended up bringing in £120,000 worth of income per year from their pitch. So it was almost double what the hockey club alone were looking to bring in. That's partly because the club grew, and partly because there was additional sporting activities on the pitch outside of hockey when the club weren't using it. So there are pitches out there that generate well in excess of £100,000. Equally, there's pitches that of different sizes, or maybe in areas of the country where they'll be generating nearer 50. But more often than not, particularly on a resurface, the income generated will be over and above the fast track funding for a resurface. On a new build, we can have a look at that in more detail specific to your site. I'm conscious of time, and here we are, sort of just about an hour in. So that's the end of the detail that we're giving you today. So the first step to funding is really getting in contact with us, and we will have a chat on the phone or by Teams, Zoom. These days is a lot more straightforward than it used to be, and people are used to it. But ultimately, the first thing we really need to do is to come out, arrange a consultation, site visit, so that we can produce that feasibility report. And that will give you what I call a really accurate working document against which you can make some really informed decisions, so that you can ascertain exactly whether your project is viable, whether it's going to work, what the implications of doing it are, and how then next steps can lead to developing that project over a period of time. And as I mentioned earlier, we aren't just here if the project's ready to go tomorrow. More often than not, we're working on projects for at least 12 months. On new builds, it's more often than not 18 months plus. So we want to create long-term relationships, partnerships with you as customers to give you the best advice possible, so that you can get the best chance of your scheme happening. Thank you very much. Hopefully that was useful, and I've just been passed some questions. So although I said it would be an hour, we're just in the questions now. So if you've got a chance to hang on, then we'll go through some of these. I'm not privy to the chat, because if I was, I wouldn't be able to do the presentation as well. So I can multitask, but not that well. So these are the questions I've been given. So it says here, this is from Martin Lahure. If the land is owned by an education establishment, but a hockey club is funding the pitch, does that help in accessing funding? The answer to that is, it absolutely should. And there'll be two ways of looking at it. The first way is the hockey club in a position to access the funding direct? And the answer, more often than not, is that is more difficult than the second option, which is to build a business case where you're the anchor tenant and an agreement's in place as to security tenure, etc. But basically, the school would then take the funding out, and you would be contractually agreeing to make those payments back to the school, to whatever level that might be to suit the two parties. So the answer is, it should absolutely help, and there'll be the two options available. Without knowing the specifics, it's virtually impossible for me to say which would work best. All I can say from experience is, it would typically be easier for the school to access, because of the perception that the banks have of education sector compared to sports club sector. But there isn't a cast iron guarantee that you wouldn't be able to access the funding. So probably one to talk to us specifically about, but certainly if you can have that funding available, then that almost makes it a no-brainer, I would think, because as I mentioned before, the school can access it during the day, and you can access it at the times that you want during the evenings and weekends. So hopefully that answers the question. Claire Thomas has asked, I'd like to know more about multi-use surfaces. So are there opportunities, greater opportunities for sport, play, and therefore income? Yes is the answer again. There would be another hour-long, probably more, presentation on what different types of surfaces are out there. But just as an example to perhaps whet an appetite for you, the LTA, England Netball, and England Hockey, along with the FIH, Sport England, in part ourselves, have recently established something called Gen 2, which is a multi-sport model for a full-size pitch or smaller facilities, where tennis, netball and hockey can be played to accepted standards, and the governing bodies involved have obviously signed that off, and Sport England are quite supportive of it as well. Are supportive of it. So that is an example of whereas before that standard, you might have been saying, we'll build a hockey pitch and we can do a bit of tennis and netball on it. We're now in a situation where we can design a pitch and create performance to an accepted standard for all three sports. So that is where a tennis club could go along and be based, a netball club equally, and a hockey club. And that would then be a really robust business case, I imagine, with 3 clubs of that type accessing a pitch, on top of which you can still play 5-a-side football. So there's still that option as well. So yes, there are multi-use surfaces. Equally, there's increasingly multi-sport sub-based solutions that mean the performance criteria for different sports is greater. So it's not just the surface, it's also how you manipulate the performance in the layers below. And that's what, Not Sport do. We're designers of these things. So that would definitely work. And yeah, the more sports that you can introduce, the more income potential you've got. 3G pitches, just to sort of address that, 3G as a surface is and was specifically designed for football and rugby. And that is pretty much at the expense of all other sports. So as a school, you'd be developing a 3G. It would be football, rugby. You might be able to do some introductory hockey, just hitting a ball around. But you're basically saying we're building a pitch for football, rugby. And if you want rugby, then you also have to introduce a shock pad layer to comply with World Rugby standards. So that, again, is where we would come in and provide a bit of advice and support as to what that looks like, how that can work. And again, there's different sub-based systems that you can give to manipulate the performance for football, rugby, or whatever it might be. But 3G, football, rugby, multi-use sports, including hockey, give you more flexibility. Rob Riddleston's asked, can we help? Do we help with supporting the planning process? Yes, we do. So we do that in-house, and we also have external partners as well. Typically, it's done in-house. My colleague Jason Palmer looks after that, and some of you on the present webinar might be working with Jason, I think, already. So we do, is the answer. And because we work at risk, we won't and don't, chase projects that are never going to happen. We're quite blunt and upfront. Again, as some of you on the webinar might have experienced, about saying, look, there's a 2% chance you're going to get planning here. Is that enough to justify spending, £10,000-20,000 in consultants fees for an ecology survey, a ground investigation, all the things you're going to need to pull together a robust planning application, because that's the investment you're looking to do. So the answer is we will absolutely help with supporting the planning, and that detail of what you can expect the planning to entail and cost will be identified from day one within our feasibility reports. So you'll know from day one what that will look like. Sunita Pote has asked, is the funding accessible to independent schools? Yes, so independent schools can access it. We've done one recently, just a couple of months ago, it was handed over, and we've done 2 or 3 since 2013 when it launched. And we're increasingly seeing the independent sector engage with us on this, because, of course, everything COVID means that everybody's cash and funding is increasingly carefully managed. So this is a good option for independents as well as everybody else to look at options on funding. Let's see. Okay, so Tristan Andrews has asked, each project will have its own variables, absolutely, 100%. We're always surprised when we go out. We're always learning new things. So we don't have every answer, but between us and our partners, we typically find a way of getting the answers you need. So every project does have its own variables. As a ballpark figure, what should the budget be for a resurface of a hockey pitch to include shock pad and turf? So we maybe covered that on slide after you submit your question, but you're looking at around that £210,000 with the shock pad as well, and a good quality. That would be a sand dress grass. So if it was sandfield, it might be less. So like you say, there's variables that you can look at. There's more expensive shock pads. There's more traditional shock pads. Depending on your base construction, it might mean one's more viable than the other. But yeah, you're going to be in around that £210,000 figure. And that, again, covers everything that we do as well. A couple more questions for those of you still able to hang on. Do the repayments include VAT? I should know the answer to that. I believe Anthony Price, who asked that question, do the repayments include VAT? I think they do. So on our projection sheets, no, it's all plus VAT. Everything that you've seen today is plus VAT. Now, again, Unilink will guide you as to, if you're a registered charity and things like that, how you can get the VAT back or become VAT exempt. You can see as I'm bumbling along on this answer that I am not the expert that you need if you've got specific questions around VAT, but obviously that comes up quite regularly and we can field that through our specialist finance partners. But every figure you've seen on the presentation at the moment is excluding VAT, and therefore everything is plus VAT. Yeah, that makes sense. A question from Charlotte Mallion: if not sport or acting as consultant to develop the tender spec and help to evaluate tenders, would this preclude you from submitting a tender yourself? Yeah, so that's a very good question, and probably something I should have been clearer on. Is what, not just what we do, equally what we're not, and what we're not is a contractor, and we are not a manufacturer. So we sit in between those two areas, acting as your specialist designers, advisors, project managers. So yeah, we wouldn't tender for the right to construct a project because we physically aren't a contractor. Yeah, if that's the question, that would be the answer. Obviously, what we do is sometimes tender for the right to work as a consultant or a designer on a project. But because we're the only company that's able to access the fast track funding, if that was something that you were looking to build into the scheme, then it's sort of Hobson's choice up to a point that, yeah, you can go out to tender, but if nobody else can offer the funding solution you need, then it's all a bit moot, really. But yeah, we don't tender for the right to construct a pitch because we are not the contractor. We obviously go out to tender with the customers with whom we work to find the contractor to build the pitch that then we project manage to make sure he's constructed correctly. Claire Thomas has asked what the difference is between private and state schools. I'm guessing that's relating to the funding rather than a discussion on the differences in how they operate. But basically, because an academy has to procure within the regulations set out by the Department of Education, which is, if you're an academy, the SFA, there is criteria against which you have to procure. If you're an independent school, you typically will have to work with trustees or governors or whoever, but you basically can procure a project how you see fit because you are independent by the nature of the name from any overarching procurement regulations. So in terms of procurement, that gives you flexibility. And then because you aren't having to adhere to the FSA regulations and guidance on funding, you can take out a finance lease, an operating lease, or a loan. If you're in the state sector as an academy or a state school, you would have to do it as an operating lease. Again, probably an answer that we would need to give more detail to, and again, conscious of time, probably something that I can't go into specifically now. But basically, if you're a private school, you've got flexibility of procurement. If you're a state school, you've got to procure within the regulations in which you operate. Okay. Another question from Martin Lahore. How much support do you give on the commercial aspects of layout? For example, helping a club to work out what facilities and layout would help drive commercial revenues. So we do that. We can explain to you the merits and otherwise of multiple pitch markings to divide it into thirds or quarters or whatever it will be. Obviously, the more you can divide your pitch, in theory, and up to a point, the more lettable space you've got, because it's often a surprise that most pitches aren't let as a full footprint. Most lettings are in a third or a half or a quarter. So if you've got more space, more lettable areas, in theory, the more you can let. So yeah, we can do that. And then we work with external partners that can manage the bookings and the lettings, and their job and their business premise is to guarantee a level of income so that the profits then reach a point where it can be split, and you as an asset owner get X percentage, and the operator of the lettings looking after that, responsible for delivering whatever level of income is agreed, take their proportion. As I say earlier, it's quite commonly 80% to you as the customer and 20% to the company running the lettings. And there's different models that you can use. Some are very hands-on, some booking management companies just do the marketing and the bookings. And again, there's no one size fits all. And then what we can also do, as I mentioned, is work with partners who can very, very in-depth do in-depth studies using data that they've generated over many years to identify what demand there is in a particular town or region of a town for a new pitch. And again, that will help with the commercial justification of the project. And then there's no getting around it. The vast majority of schools still do the legwork part as well. So you still got to get some boots on the ground, get out there if you're a school, for example, and engage with local junior football teams, rugby teams, hockey teams, tennis clubs, and pick up the phone or invite them in, show them what you're looking to do, and basically challenge them. If we built this, would you use it? What rates would you typically expect to pay? And then again, that can form part of the business case moving forward as well. So it's a bit of really analytical, data-driven analysis mixed with different ways you can lay out the pitch to generate additional or maximise your income potential, and also boots on the ground talking to people that might let the pitch. So again, hopefully that can answer that question. I've got Mark and Tom whispering away next to me as if there's other questions to answer, but okay. But conscious of time, I think hopefully that has meant that the questions that were getting asked in more than once have been addressed. So conscious of the time, we said it'd take an hour. Well, maybe I was a bit ambitious with that. We're at an hour and 15, so I've obviously rambled on for too long. I'd just like to say to everybody that signed up, and those of you still here listening to the Q&A section that has gone on a little bit longer than perhaps originally planned, thank you for attending. Please do email us with any questions. I'll give the email address again. It's info@notsport, and that is NOTTSSPORT.com. So there's no S at the end of sport. It's notsport.com. So info@notsport.com, or you can simply reply to Mark's email, who was the gentleman who very kindly set all this up. I can take no credit for that, and sent you the details of how to log on and things like that. But we are very much here to engage with you, answer any specific questions you have, and also engage with you about your particular project, and ultimately, hopefully, arrange over the coming weeks a visit to understand your specific needs, requirements, and develop an initial feasibility study against which you can, as I say, make some informed decisions. So thank you very much to everybody who's attended. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everybody's busy, and I hope it's been of value, and maybe we'll see each other in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.